And so, yeah, welcome once again to Student Engagement 101. I'm very pleased to introduce my colleagues, Rachel Muse and Raquel V. Heel, who are the presenters for today's workshop. And Rachel is a curriculum designer and educator who is committed to innovative pedagogy that centers student knowledge and actively challenges injustice and oppression. And they've been working with the Edible Schoolyard Project as a curriculum contractor since 2020. And Raquel V. Heel is the Edible Schoolyard's Director of Learning, and she is the lead designer in over 180 lessons that are free and available to educators at our website, edibleschoolyard.org. And I'm very happy to have them here. And so thank you both for presenting today, and I'll pass it to Rachel to lead us off.
Thank you so much, Russell, for the introduction. I am so excited to be back with Edible Schoolyard doing this workshop. Thank you all so much for joining us today. To start off, I just want to walk us through our agenda for the workshop. So we're going to start off by just defining and framing student engagement together. Then we're going to have a brief reflection in breakout groups. Next, we're going to talk through the three main pillars of student engagement together. And then we have a second collective group activity. We're going to create a knowledge bank. And then we'll head into our closing and have some time for open questions. And next, I'd like to just review our goals for today. First, we want to establish basic understandings of student engagement and its importance. Next, we would like to reflect on our own practices in relation to student engagement. And then finally, we want to create a collective resource to support our student engagement practices. I'm going to kick it off to Raquel to talk about a definition of student engagement.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. So we always like to start by thinking of a shared definition. Student engagement can mean many different things, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. If anyone were in the workshop yesterday, I know we sort of did a similar activity about thinking about and defining student engagement. So what we'd love you to do is just in the chat, think about and write in your thoughts about how do you define student engagement? Awesome. Thank you, Akiko. Connections with students. Responses to questions. Great. So soliciting students. Awesome. The dialogue. I see there's interactions, actively conversing with each other and the teacher. There's a lot of a couple different places it talked about active, curiosity, 360-degree learning. Awesome. Thank you so much. These are great. Active again. There's reflection and feeling. Great. Students are engaged in very quiet ways, thoughtful, curious, hearing that a lot. Wonderful. Thank you. Those are all great parts of student engagement. I think we can define it a bunch of ways. We like one central definition. Russell, would you mind going to the next slide? Great. And for us, really, defining student engagement means student engagement is the degree of attention, right? Some of you said that, active attention, interest, curiosity, and positive emotional connections that students experience while learning. We also like to think about an individual's interest and enthusiasm for school or for learning, and the idea of student engagement as simply being energy in action. We want to encourage you to hold these definitions in your mind as you move through the workshop, and really as you move through your time through the whole series of the workshops and virtual training that we are doing this month. It's important to think about student engagement not simply as what you may think it to be on the onset. Student engagement really means more than what students are doing and what is being required of them to complete in a particular assignment. When we talk about student engagement, instead we want to think about it and how it's achieved with students becoming fully invested in their learning, have a desire to learn and a willingness to do the work and gain a well-rounded understanding of the topic. Awesome. And I'm going to pass it now to Rachel so they can talk a little bit about kind of what we mean and why we think student engagement is so critical and important in our kitchen and garden spaces.
Yeah, thank you, Raquel. So just to kind of elaborate on what Raquel was already saying, without student engagement, students might be relying on rote memorization or autopilot or obedience in the classroom rather than really internalizing deep and lasting learning. Additionally, teachers may be sort of tempted to spend a lot of time focused on behavior and classroom management, when in actuality, spending the time on student engagement at the instructional level can have really meaningful impacts on student behavior in the classroom. And so acknowledging the ways that your students engage in your kitchen and garden classrooms and really focusing on how to access student attention, interest, and curiosity can set you up with a strong base for your classroom. So in this workshop, we are going to be drawing on some questions and activities from a student engagement workbook that Raquel and I put together about a year ago. The workbook has readings, podcasts, and articles on student engagement, as well as tools for interacting with those resources. It has opportunities for reflection on your own teaching practices, opportunities to observe and recognize student engagement. And it can also provide some, and at the end of this workshop, we're going to provide a little bit of information for you. You can access that workbook for free if any of you are interested in that. Now we're going to do a reflection activity in some breakout groups with Raquel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rachel. So we're going to spend the next about 12 or so minutes reflecting first for yourself and then going to some breakout rooms to discuss the following questions. So what I'd like folks to do is find a piece of paper, open a Google Doc, sit with your thoughts and think and reflect about a time that your students were particularly engaged. How did you know that they were engaged? It's an important part of that. So think about that time that they were engaged and then think about what was happening. How do you know? What were the signals that students were giving you that they were engaged? And then think about, in your opinion, what about your instruction or the learning environment facilitated that student engagement? So we're going to give folks about 3 minutes to silently write and reflect, and then we'll send you into some breakout groups. So I'll notify you when that time to stop writing are and when we're going to send you to breakout groups. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm going to pass it on to Rachel, who's going to talk a little bit about the pillars of student engagement and talk about kind of what a little bit of the theoretical underpinnings that support the ways we think about student engagement.
Thank you, Raquel, and thank you everyone for participating in that activity. And it's so wonderful to hear a little bit from y'all's experiences. So now that we've done that little bit of thinking about engagement and what it may have looked like to us in our classrooms thus far, we're going to talk about these sort of 3 main areas, also known as pillars of student engagement. And as Raquel and I talk about these topics, I really urge you to maybe grab a pen and paper or take some notes on your phone. We are going to be kind of returning to some of this later for the activity. So just if there are things that really stand out to you or ideas or tips that feel particularly useful, please take this opportunity to write some things down. So we're going to be looking at these 3 pillars today: academic, intellectual, and social emotional engagement. So we're going to look at them a little more deeply, starting with academic student engagement. So a central question underpinning academic engagement is, do the students in my kitchen or garden classroom have what they need to complete the tasks I'm asking of them? Ensuring that students have all the information and tools that they need facilitates engagement with the content that you're teaching. So we all process and share information differently. It's really vital to provide students with optional supports and choices for how to learn and share so that they are all able to fully engage in the content. So we have a few tips for how you might increase academic engagement. One tip is to incorporate movement. Using movement to illustrate concepts can help students connect muscle memory to the content. Tip number 2 is provide options for learning and expressing ideas. Each student may have different strengths and needs around processing and around expressing ideas. And so giving students choices such as presenting instructions in written and verbal forms, or allowing students to record, write, draw, show, or speak their ideas are all ways that you can do that. And these types of differentiation make it possible for more students to engage with the lesson. Third tip is to scaffold student learning with worksheets, visual aids, and recorded instructions. So some students may require more support to complete a task than others. And so offering these sort of levels of optional support can provide more students with the tools that they need to engage effectively. And then finally, help students meet their basic needs of food, rest, and feeling like they belong. So engagement just can't happen when a student is hungry or tired or feeling unsafe. And so providing students with a warm, welcoming, and compassionate environment to have a snack, take a break, share how they feel can actually really help to facilitate that academic engagement. And Raquel's going to just show a couple ESY examples of how you might think about academic engagement.
Awesome, thank you. Russell, next slide, please. Great. So we have a couple examples of the ways we think about like academic engagement. And one of them is an example of a curriculum that we actually just launched titled Interdependence in the Garden. And it's a curriculum that's aligned to NGSS science standards. You know, in the design of this curriculum, it's about a 12 lesson curriculum. We really took our time in thinking about what are the core ideas that we can emulate or that can be emphasized in the kind of central learning outcomes for NGSS. And we identified 3. So, you know, I think part of what we want to encourage is that even when you're aligning to something like standards, in some regards, less is more. And so this curriculum across 12 lessons only aligned to 3 central concept standards. The other thing we want to give you an example is in one of the lessons is around biotic and abiotic factors. And so we really provided in that lesson a lot of visual aids for students to support student investigations in the garden ecosystem. You see here, there's an example of the biotic interaction cards. In the lesson, they're talking about how do different organisms and beings interact in different ecosystems and in our garden ecosystem. And so we just tried to give examples of what kind of visual aids could be. This is a really great way. The curriculum is available to you all for free online on our website. So I encourage you to look through it, see, kind of read a little bit of our curriculum outline to get a sense of the rationale and approach to how we wrote the curriculum, and then utilize these lessons to fit within your context. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Raquel. So now we're going to move on to the second pillar of student engagement, which is intellectual engagement. And just a quick aside, I know that for some people, the word intellectual can be kind of like, what's the deal there? But we're interpreting that word to really mean allowing a student to value their own opinion and mind and to be curious about what they're learning. So that's just a preface. The primary question behind intellectual engagement is, are students interested in and curious about the subject? Activating students' curiosity is really foundational to student engagement. Students come into the classroom with their backgrounds, their experiences and interests, and they may not all connect to the material in the same way. So really allowing student curiosity to drive learning, connecting the content to students' backgrounds and experiences, and putting in the time to make the content feel really exciting are all ways to address intellectual engagement. And so just like with academic engagement, we have a few tips for you to consider. The first is provide opportunities for student choice. Allow them to choose what to study or investigate. So allowing that choice in the kitchen and garden classroom can really help them connect to the content and select topics that authentically interest and inspire them. A second tip is to learn about students' backgrounds, and then connect class materials to their lived experiences. So students come into the kitchen or garden with prior knowledge and prior experiences. And so drawing from that knowledge and experience can empower students and make the information much more relevant to them and more engaging. The third tip is to identify opportunities for students to drive their own learning. So while it can be tempting to guide all of students' activities and investigations, giving them the chance to take on leadership through student-led projects and things of that nature can really give students agency and increase engagement. And then finally, use hooks and interactive activities to capture student interest. So creating active, fun, and creative activities can pique students' curiosity and pull them into a topic. Raquel, I'll pass it over to you to show a few ESY examples.
Thanks so much. Next slide, please, Russell. Awesome. So I wanted to share just a couple examples in the way we're going to dive actually deeper into the idea of curious, how you engage and encourage curious learning in the session that Russell and I will be leading later on in the month. But I want to give you a couple examples of the way that I really love to think about it. I think the values of question and questioning and creating inquiry question is a really powerful way to solicit curiosity and wonder and critical thinking in students. And so I want to give you an example of a lesson called What is Organic that is from our Understanding Organic curriculum. That curriculum in many ways is actually designed completely around a question of what is organic and what does it mean to you, and then giving students different opportunities to understand those questions, to layer on meaning for them and understanding. I think when you open and guide your instruction with a question, really interesting things can happen. And so this lesson is an example of that, in which we're just exploring the idea of organic and allowing students' thoughts to emerge and whatever, and kind of follow their thinking with that. The other example I want to give is around this kind of fun activity we developed in Edible Ed at home, is around exploring it's called the Kitchen Tool Exploration. And the reason why I like this is because it essentially is asking students to just explore something of meaning in the kitchen through tools. And so it really is a really low stakes activity. Kind of anyone is an expert in it, because it's just about their feelings, thoughts, opinions around what they're learning. And you can do that on anything. It could be in a garden about a plant. What plant feels meaningful to you here? And then allowing the lesson to develop from that. So it's a really great example of a way that something really simple can really blossom through the ways that you ask students question and you sit with them in their investigations and the curiosity of the subject.
Thank you, Raquel. We're going to move to the third pillar of student engagement, which is social emotional student engagement. And the driving question for this area is, do students feel safe, supported, and seen enough to engage? For students to engage academically and intellectually, they need to establish the necessary trust with their teachers and their peers. And to set the stage for student learning, it's essential to create a caring classroom environment where discipline is restorative and each student feels seen and respected. So the tips here are, first, to establish class agreements. So we really feel that it's quite important to set agreements as a class so that students can co-construct the norms of the kitchen or the garden that will allow them to feel safe to engage. So consider doing this practice early on, perhaps at your first meeting with a group of students, so that you can all kind of get on the same page together. A second tip is to practice restorative circles to build a class culture and resolve conflict. So restorative circles are an alternative to disciplinary measures like suspension or expulsion that allows students and teachers to work through conflict and harm, while also giving everyone a voice and a chance to be heard. So they can also be a really great space for informal connection and trust building as well. The third tip is to incorporate discussions of social emotional learning into the lessons. So supporting students through managing emotions and navigating relationships when those topics come up shows students that their feelings and emotional needs matter, and creates a sense of safety so students can engage both academically and intellectually. And then finally, include family and community members in class activities. Showing interest in students' families and communities outside of the kitchen and garden classroom can really demonstrate a genuine interest in who they are as people and can help facilitate emotional safety for students. And not to mention, families can have a lot to offer around the subject of food and plants and recipes. I'll pass it to Raquel to share a couple ESY examples again.
Thank you so much. Great. So I just wanted to share, you know, as part of the curriculum Understanding Organic, we have an agreement setting resource for you all as teachers. So we invite you to look at that. Think about, we have these kind of classroom mindsets that we created. It's a great lesson if you haven't done agreements before to check that out as a good guide for that. The other example I want to share is around a lesson that we've done in the past. We have done some trainings on is around food memory. I think sometimes the kitchen, it can be a really vibrant place where you can set up really low stakes conversations around feelings, and things like food memories are a great way to solicit students' effectual responses to different things that maybe aren't necessarily about them personally, but provide a space in which they can feel safe to share those kinds of things. I also think food memories is a great sort of introduction activity to integrating more culturally relevant and responsive teaching practices and including more of students' experiences and their families and their traditions into the classroom.
All right, thank you for that, Raquel. We are going to move into an activity together, and I'm already just so excited seeing what people are writing in the chat and all of the conversations that are happening there, because it's going to transition really well into what we're going to do together. You all have so much knowledge to contribute, and we're going to try to kind of access that and create a resource to use. So before we really dive into the activity, we'd like to take a moment to reflect on a couple questions and start thinking about some helpful student engagement strategies. So in the chat, please respond to one or both of the following prompts. What is most resonating with you from the information shared? And what is one way that you feel that you already support student academic, intellectual, or social emotional engagement? So go ahead and take some time and answer those questions in the chat, and we'll check back in. Thank you, Brett. So I'm seeing asking students what they want to learn and how they want to learn. Sheila's also resonating with the students driving their own learning and sharing experiences, seeing things about student safety, bringing the student's background into the teachings. Everything is resonating. That's fantastic. But the establishment of collective, the place of stories. Interesting. Love that. So much great stuff. Incorporating movement, the reminder of meeting basic needs before we can engage. Designing lessons around a question. Absolutely. Distributed self-evaluation questionnaires. Love that. Wow. So yeah, I'm seeing just such a wealth of ideas and knowledge in the chat. Really exciting stuff. Even, just some links just came in. Super fantastic. So we're going to try to now funnel some of this knowledge and this initial thinking that we're doing towards an activity together. We're going to make a collective knowledge bank that we can use to increase student engagement in our kitchen and garden classrooms. So as you can see in the chat, each of us comes in here with our own experiences with student engagement. We have a sense of what may have worked for us, and we may have learned some new strategies. So we're first going to take about 10 minutes to work individually and add some student engagement tips and strategies to the knowledge bank. So when we do that, if you feel moved to, you can go ahead and turn off your camera and microphone. And you can use either the QR code that you see on the screen or the link that's being dropped in the chat to get to a Padlet site. And on the Padlet, there will be some instructions, some prompts that you can respond to with activities and strategies for student engagement. So go ahead and feel free to turn off your camera, mute yourselves if you feel moved, no pressure. We'll be here if you have any questions as you're working on it. You can feel free to unmute or write something in the chat with a question, and go ahead and take the next 10-ish minutes to add some of your favorite resources, links, strategies, activities, etc. All right, so finish up your last thoughts. And we're going to move into the next part of the activity, which will be taking a bit of time to actually kind of explore the knowledge bank together in breakout groups. Just peeking at the Padlet now, it looks really fantastic. Y'all have so many great ideas. So Russell, if you wouldn't mind resharing the slides when you can, we have a couple questions that you can use here to guide your discussion in breakout groups. First, you can spend a little bit of time kind of just looking at what you see, checking out the resources, and then you can discuss the following questions. Which strategy or resource have you found the most useful in your own work? And which strategy or resource from the knowledge bank are you most excited to try, and why? And if your conversation goes elsewhere, that's okay too. So we're going to have you in breakout rooms for about 10 minutes or so. All right. Well, seeing some really fantastic conversations happening in the chat, and excited to continue those in future workshops. Raquel is going to shift the conversation to our workbook, our student engagement workbook.
Awesome. I can't believe we're almost at time. We're close to the end of our workshop. Thank you so much to everyone and all of you who participated, shared your thoughts in the chat, in the Padlet, reflected, did some self-reflection. I feel like it's been I feel very inspired. It's been a very fruitful workshop for me personally. I hope it has been for you. I wanted to share a little bit about our student engagement workbook. Great, awesome. So this workshop, this series is really inspired by a workbook that Rachel and I collaborated on designing. It's a 56-page workbook with a number of sections that really get you to dive deep into student engagement. So if you're interested in exploring the ideas of student engagement further and thinking about how you can apply best practices to your kitchen garden classroom, we have this resource available to you. Again, it's free and available. You just click on our resource library, the link that's in the chat, and you can have access to it. You're welcome to take it. We also have some different tools in which you can kind of create a professional learning community with your fellow coworkers and fellow educators around student engagement. Has a number of tools and worksheets, some garden scenarios to get you to think about best practices, and then some worksheets around creating a shared learning bank. So, please use the workbook, share with us how the experience has gone, and we're excited to keep talking about student engagement through this whole month. Before we go to kind of some open questions, just an opportunity for you to ask each other or Rachel and I anything you want about student engagement. Russell's going to just do a quick kind of closing us out before we head over to just some open questions. You're welcome to join us, but you don't have to.